Decision. Yes, it is. It's an important one. But okay, let's find out what are the implications of cutting and then reigniting something that we all know can and has occurred. And that's excessive bets on one sector, namely housing in the US. Subprime. Steve Keen, you are up at lights tonight, Steve. Welcome. Up early this morning. Well, actually, not that early now in London. Nice civilised time. The sun comes through the window. The coffee's on, and you're tonight on Four Corners. I'll give you that plug. Just on housing. What are you saying this time round? What have they wheeled you in to say?
Well, they wheeled me in to say I got it wrong on the timing, but right on the mechanism, because I've always argued that what causes rising house prices is fundamentally not just rising, but accelerating mortgage debt. And that's what's been lying behind the wonderfully successful numbers of bubble, the rising house prices for the last 3 years. Have meant Australia's mortgage debt has risen to something of the order of over 100% of GDP. And to give you an idea of America, they're getting down to about 50%, having reached 70%. So we managed to evade falling house prices back in 2008, 2010. First of all, by the first-home vendors scheme, as I called it, the first-home buyers, dragged them into the market. And then the RBA, quite deliberately, seeing dropping interest rates as a way of stimulating activity in the housing market, completely ignoring what that was doing to the debt levels in the Australian economy. And that debt, with those rising debts, what gave us rising prices, and that, of course, is the rub. That can't go on forever.
So what are the implications tomorrow of a cut to everything you just said now? Do you see that unleashing a fresh wave of absolutely aberrant demand, or it'll be more restrained this time given the other settings?
It could continue the bubble, because the RBA is the only bank in the world that has room to inflate a bubble even further by dropping rates with 2% before it hits zero. And I firmly believe we're going to end up with zero rates in the country, because the RBA has completely failed to learn from the lessons in the rest of the world and is going down exactly the same track of promoting a housing bubble as a way of driving the economy. It will come back to bite them. I think it will come back to bite them in the next year or so, but of course their response will be drop rates, and if they drop rates it could drag suckers, pardon the expression, back into the investment market once more. And the end result of that, we would end up with the highest level of household debt in the Western world by a significant margin, which is a great economic management achievement by the Reserve Bank.
All right, panels, thoughts coming in now.
Steve, Greg McKenna from Business Insider and AxiTrader. Just, hello mate, just working on that assumption that rates go to zero. So the efficacy of monetary policy in Australia still got some traction, you're saying, but how bad does it get if that bubble bursts? You know, what's your take on that?
It's quite severe. I mean, when the house prices fall and start falling, that will encourage people getting out of the market who are already starting to get out because they simply can't afford the deposits anymore. And with that effect, without China's buying to keep us inflated, that's the one thing that's the wild card in this whole story. But absent that, you have a slowdown on the rate of growth of debt, and that slowdown in credit, which is what growth of debt is, that slowdown in credit has a dramatic effect reducing demand in the economy. Now, at the moment, the increase in credit, the increase in level of private debt, is equivalent to 15% of GDP every year. That's how much we're growing right now. That's not the most we've grown. Back just before the global financial crisis hit, we were growing at 25% of GDP. But we're literally, to keep demand at the level where we've got unemployment where it is right now, house prices and so on, literally requires us to have debt growing of the order of 12% per year faster than GDP. You simply can't sustain that forever. When it bursts, the economy will fall over. And that is going to happen regardless of who gets fully elected in whatever the next crazy election is held in Australia.
So it won't be far away. And there's also a new RBA governor who will be taking the chair. Let's say you were put in that chair by one of the other parties come July 3. What do you think needs to be done? What should he be doing to address the concerns you have?
Well, and it's too late. I think the captains of the good ship to Titanic dash Australia have headed towards a debt crisis just like the rest of the world had in 2008. They're simply delayed it. It'll be bigger because we've accumulated more private debt in the process. So we're heading for the iceberg. It's a question of what happens when the person in charge hits the iceberg. We should be blaming Glenn Stevens. I'm quite happy to say that, blaming Glenn Stevens and the crew at the RBA for getting us here in the first place. Whoever takes over, we'll have to pick up the pieces. and they'll be caught in the same level of incompetence that the reserve banks and the rest of the world have been in dealing with deflation. Because as you were saying earlier, that's the one thing the central banks don't know how to reverse is deflation.